A midnight snack turned into a fatal bite. Welcome to Mystery Parlor. I'm your host, Axon. I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Your presence always sweetens the storytelling. Let's uncover the truth. If you're imagining that the case started with a blood-stained brownie on Wolfe's Persian rug, I regret to inform you we don't open with drama. No crashing glass, no screams in the night, and no armed intruder trying to convert the orchid. Room into a crime scene. It started with dessert, more specifically a box of them. I had just come back from a brief and mildly unpleasant trip to the bank, where I had the pleasure of watching a teller treat me like a pickpocket with an overdeveloped sense of charm. By the time I was climbing the brownstone steps, I was in the mood for a bourbon and a grumble. Fritz met me in the hallway, his voice pitched low. "She is in the front room," he said. "With a box." I raised an eyebrow. "She?" Fritz nodded. "She insists on seeing Mr. Wolfe. I told her he does not receive guests unannounced, but she had a box," I finished for him. "Now, you need to understand something about Nero Wolfe and sweets. He doesn't do them. The man's a gourmand, not a sugar freak. He'll tolerate dessert the way a king might tolerate a badly timed trumpet blast. Barely and only if it's from someone too rich to rebuke." But that didn't explain the look on Fritz's face. Not quite concern, closer to guilt, as if he'd allowed something in that should have been left at the doorstep. I found her standing in the front room, arms folded over a cardboard pastry box tied with a red ribbon. She wore black slacks, of a mint green blouse, and a face that told you she didn't give a damn what you thought of either. Late 30s, maybe 40, brown hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. She looked like someone who could make a perfect soufflé and threaten to stab you with the same spoon. "I'm Archie Goodwin," I said, giving her the smile that once talked a state senator's mistress into turning over his handwritten confession. "Who wanted to see Mr. Wolfe?" She looked me over like she was deciding whether to feed me or slap me. "I brought these for him," she said, and tapped the box. "And yes, I need his help. May I ask your name?" "Monica Talbot." That meant nothing to me. Neither did the logo on the side of the box. "Midnight cravings, small batch desserts. Pastry bribery is discouraged here," I said, "especially past lunch." She set the box down on the nearest table and unlatched the top. The smell hit me like a warm punch. Chocolate, walnuts, something spicy underneath. "He'll want to taste these," she said. I gave her credit for confidence. Wolfe wouldn't sample a brownie from his own mother if it showed up uninvited. Before I could launch into the usual song and dance about appointments, fees, and Wolfe's legendary allergy to unexpected guests, the doorbell rang again. Monica's. Head snapped toward it. I moved to answer, but she was faster. "No, don't." Her voice was sharp. "Let me see who it is." I raised my hands and stood back. She opened the door just a crack. Her shoulders stiffened, and when she turned back to me, her voice had dropped to a whisper. "I shouldn't have come." Then she grabbed the box and pushed it into my arms. "Give these to Mr. Wolfe. Tell him I'm not the only one who knows, and if he eats one, tell him to be careful." And just like that, she was gone. I closed the door and watched through the curtain as she climbed into a small black sedan and peeled away from the curb like she'd just remembered the oven was still on. For a moment, I stood there holding a suspicious box of baked goods and wondering whether I was looking at a client, a lunatic, or something in between. Then I carried the box into the office, where Nero Wolfe was seated at his desk, reading Pliny the Elder. Like it might reveal a new method for making veal. He glanced up. "Archie, your presence is neither requested nor required. I come bearing gifts." He frowned. "That is a phrase which heralds doom." I set the box down with the delicacy I reserve for potential explosive devices and gave him the short version. "Woman, brownies, warning." He looked at the box like it had insulted his mother. "You opened it?" She did. "Smells decent." Spicy. Chocolate. I am not interested in sweetmeats. She said someone else knows. No idea what that means. Oh, and if you eat one, be careful. That got his attention. He leaned back, folding his arms. Did she give a name? Monica Talbot. Now that did something. His eyes narrowed, and he tapped the arm of his chair. Fritz, he called. Fritz appeared in record time. Take this to the kitchen, Wolfe said. Refrigerate it. Do not taste, prod, or analyze. Fritz nodded and vanished with the box like it was radioactive. Raised a brow. What gives? Wolfe didn't answer right away. Then, with a reluctant sigh, he said, Monica Talbot is or was a pastry chef of some note. I met her briefly some years ago. She catered a private function I attended at the behest of Mr. Parker Lanning. That got a rise out of me. Lanning, the media guy? Yes, a friend of dubious utility. He retired to Rhinebeck recently. He has eccentric taste in guests and worse in entertainment. Miss Talbot was one of the few pleasures of the evening. Pleasure enough to inspire nostalgia? No, her arrival is inconvenient and troubling. That was Wolfe speak for. Something stinks and I'm not pleased it's in my parlor. She asked for help, I said. He stared at me. Did she? Not in so many words. Then we wait. For what? For what follows. It will not be long. And, as usual, Wolfe was right. The phone rang just after dinner. I picked it up, expecting a telemarketer or a wrong number. Instead, a strained voice said, Is this the residence of Mr. Nero Wolfe? It is. This is Detective Durkin, NYPD. We've got a possible poisoning. Victim's name is Monica Talbot? I didn't sit down. Wolfe didn't look up, but he knew. Dead? I asked. No, Durkin said, but barely breathing. I thanked him and hung up. Well? Wolfe asked. I gave it to him straight. She didn't get far. She collapsed in her car. They found the brownie box beside her. Cops think it's connected. Wolfe nodded once. Then the case, such as it is, has begun. He rang for beer. I poured myself 2 fingers of rye. It was going to be that kind of week. The next morning brought a light drizzle and a heavier mood. I'd barely made it to my second cup of coffee when Wolfe summoned me with a flick of the bell. I strolled into the office where he was seated precisely where I'd left him, in his oversized chair surrounded by books, solitude and disdain for human unpredictability. She's alive, I reported, dropping into the red chair. Barely. Durkin called just before breakfast. Monica's in ICU at St. Luke's, still unconscious. Blood work's a mess, something toxic. They're analyzing the residue from the brownie box, Wolfe grunted. It was a low, rumbling sound, the kind he reserved for either indigestion or serious thought. She gave the box to you, he said, not to the police. She barely stayed long enough to drop it off, and she didn't say who baked them. Maybe she didn't trust anyone. Else, which is why we should not either. He gestured toward the telephone on his desk. You will call Sol Panzer. Instruct him to go to St. Luke's. He will observe any visitors and obtain a list of those admitted to her room. Emphasize discretion. Consider it done. I had the number memorized. Saul answered on the second ring. After a brief exchange, he agreed to head over immediately and promised a report by noon. If Saul were any more reliable, I'd suspect cybernetics. Wolfe tapped his fingertips together. What do we know of her current affiliations? Not much yet. No recent press mentions, no open businesses under her name. Her old shop, Midnight Cravings, closed last year. Yelp says she shut it down after a health scare. Rumor was mold in the prep fridge. Lawsuit threats. Nothing confirmed. Wolfe closed his eyes. Unfortunate, she was exacting. Still might be. If she pulls through. His eyes opened. If. We didn't have to wait long for the next knock on the front door. This time, I was ahead of Fritz. I opened it to find a man in his late 50s, slim build, good suit, bad shoes. His expression screamed importance, and his smile was just a little too ready. "Nero Wolfe?" he asked, extending a hand. "Still me. But you'll have to make do with Archie." "Goodwin? Ah, yes, I'm Russell Tinnan. I'm Monica's. I was her business manager. We worked together for years. I heard what happened." Fast ears. His smile thinned. "Word gets around. May I come in?" I let him in, but didn't offer him a seat. Wolfe doesn't like unexpected guests unless they bring hard cash, gourmet ingredients, or scandal. Mr. Tinnan had the potential for all three, but I wasn't ready to vouch for him. "Would you tell Mr. Wolfe I'd like to speak with him? It's important." He doesn't entertain drop-ins. Tinnan's jaw set. I think he'd make an exception if he knew someone tried to kill Monica with one of her own recipes. That earned him a moment of silence. I left him there and stepped into the office. "He says someone used her own recipe to poison her." I said, "Bring him," Wolfe replied, with the calmness of a man already forming categories in his mind. Tinnan entered and paused just inside the door, glancing around like he'd stepped into a shrine and wasn't sure if he was wearing the right shoes. Wolfe motioned to the yellow chair. "You may sit." Tinnan did, adjusting his cuffs. "You managed her business," Wolfe said. "For 9 years I handled contracts, licensing, events, press. Monica was the creative half. I was the numbers." "And are you still?" Tinnan hesitated. "That's complicated." "Uncomplicated," Wolfe said and poured himself a cold glance. "We were negotiating," Tinnan said carefully. "She wanted to relaunch Midnight Cravings. I thought it was a mistake. The market's crowded. She had offers to license her recipes to a boutique food company, Sweetcraft. They offered real money. She refused, said they'd ruin her brand. Emotional attachment. Control, he said. Monica didn't trust people to do things her way, and she had enemies. Name them. Start with the Sweetcraft rep, Lana Tripp. She tried to charm her into signing, then turned hostile when Monica refused. Claimed she'd sue for breach of verbal agreement. I made a note of the name. Anyone else? Tinnan swallowed. She had a former partner, Kenny Voss. He helped with the first shop. When it closed, he said she cut him out unfairly. I think he still blames her. A common enough tale, Wolfe said. Go on. There was also a blogger, Miranda Glick. She's got a decent following, posted a scathing review last year, said Monica's desserts were inconsistent, overpriced, even unsafe. Claimed she'd found a hair in her lavender lemon. Monica wanted to sue but decided it would only feed the fire. That is 3 names, Wolfe said. Tripp, Voss, Glick, all with motive. I'm not saying any of them tried to kill her. You don't need to. Your being here suggests you believe it possible. Tinnan looked down at his hands. I just want to know who would do something like this. So do we, Wolfe said. Tinnan rose to leave, but Wolfe held up a finger. One more question. Did you ever taste Monica Talbot's brownies? Once. Years ago they were brilliant. Were they spicy? Tinnan paused. Yes, she used cayenne, said the heat brought out the chocolate. That may be the detail that kills her, Wolfe murmured. After Tinnan left, Wolfe instructed me to call Lon Cohen at the Gazette. I got Lon's assistant, who told me he was busy massaging a scandal involving a city councilman and a yoga instructor. I left a message anyway. Find out everything you can on Sweetcraft, Lana Tripp, Kenny Voss, and Miranda Glick. In that order. I was halfway back to my chair when the phone rang again. It was Saul. She's awake, he said. But get this. She won't talk to the cops. She keeps asking for Wolfe. Said something about a list, something she saw. 5 fingers tightened on the receiver. She say what kind of list? Nope, just that it proves who's behind it. Wolfe had already poured himself a glass of beer. He looked over the rim at me. Well, he said. I relayed the message. His glass hit the table with a precise click. We proceed, he said, as if our guest is already dead. And that, from Nero Wolfe, was the beginning of war. The afternoon settled like a velvet curtain, soft and deceptive, while Fritz worked on a leek and potato soup that even managed to calm Wolfe's eyebrows. I, meanwhile, put my afternoon to more constructive use, meaning I took a cab to St. Luke's. When Saul Panzer says someone's awake and asking for Wolfe, you don't dawdle, especially if that someone might have just survived a murder attempt, with a side of walnuts. The nurses at the ICU gave me the once-over, decided I wasn't worth the argument and let me in. Monica Talbot looked pale but not fragile. There was something behind her eyes that hadn't dimmed even when the rest of her had. "You're not Wolfe," she said. "No, ma'am." That chair would give out under him in 60 seconds. "I'm Archie Goodwin." She managed the ghost of a smile. "The secretary?" "Assistant. Investigative genius. Chooser of ties." "I didn't think he'd come." "He hasn't yet. But if you tell me what we need to know, I'll see that he does." She looked down at her hands, then out the window like she was waiting for the view to make up its mind. "I was going to take them public," she said. "The brownies?" She snorted. "The list. A spreadsheet. Names, amounts, transactions. From the early days. Sweetcraft paid bribes. They faked vendor approvals, forged certifications. I didn't know when I was baking for them. But later I found it all on Kenny's drive. He'd kept everything. Probably for leverage. And how'd you get it? I borrowed his laptop last month. He left it unlocked. I copied the folder. Before he could notice, it was insurance. And where's the list now? I uploaded it to a drive. I didn't trust email. But then someone knew. I got a call 3 nights ago, anonymous number. They said if I went to the press or a lawyer, they'd silence me for good. I leaned forward. Why come to Wolfe? Because he's not corrupt. Because he's a control freak. Because someone like him is the only person who can dismantle the trap without walking into it. She was fading, but her voice stayed hard. I didn't bake that batch. I figured as much. Someone made a copy, same packaging, slightly different spice mix. Probably tampered with the base, added something toxic. I should have checked. Well, hindsight's like a cranky critic. It always shows up too late and never brings dessert. She gave me a wan smile. You'll tell him? I squeezed her hand once. You have my word. Back at the brownstone, I passed the news along in Wolfe's office. He was in his chair, hands steepled, listening with the same attention he'd give to a Latin grammar text, reluctant but thorough. She believes it was Sweetcraft, I finished. She mentioned a spreadsheet, digital records, uploaded somewhere. Wolfe closed his eyes. Call Saul, instruct him to obtain access to her residence. I want that computer, or whatever device she used to upload the file. Don't want to wait for a subpoena. If it survives to reach a court, it will be a miracle. I will not defer to miracles. I made the call. Saul was already 3 steps ahead, as usual. I'll get into her apartment, he said. Give me 4 hours. Don't wreck the place. Who do you think I am, Kramer? Meanwhile, I did what I do best, fieldwork. First stop, Sweetcraft headquarters on the west side. The receptionist looked like a bakery-themed Barbie and had the personality of a sponge, dry and full of holes. I asked for Lana Tripp, flashed a phony press badge Lon once gave me for poker night, and said I was writing a feature on independent culinary startups and their corporate courtships. 10 minutes later, Lana Tripp appeared. She was everything. I expected and then some. Blonde, composed, and exuding the kind of polished sincerity that usually comes with a matching non-disclosure agreement. Mr. Goodwin, was it? In the flour-dusted flesh. You're with Bon Appetit? Close. Urban cravings. Digital, irreverent, probably doomed. She led me into a modern glass and stainless meeting room that felt more sterile than Fritz's cutlery drawer. We're always happy to support positive press. Sweetcraft champions artisan brands. Monica's work was quite special. You mean it was? Her smile didn't twitch. She declined our offer. We respected that, but we were sad to see her business dissolve. She claimed you threatened litigation, miscommunication. Our legal department sent a standard reminder of contractual discussions. It wasn't personal. Wouldn't be the first time a standard reminder came with poison frosting. She froze for half a second. It was subtle, just enough for someone like me to notice. If you're implying, just asking. Where were you yesterday afternoon? I was in a development meeting with our R&D team, 12 to 5. We're launching a winter truffle line. I stood. You mind if I verify that? She smiled again. And please do. On my way out, I grabbed a marketing flyer. Back at the sidewalk, I made a note to have Fred check Sweetcraft's building security footage. Wolfe would want to cross-check the timing. Next stop, Kenny Voss. He lived in a one-bedroom walk-up in Midtown and answered the door in gym shorts and a tank top that probably violated zoning laws. His place smelled like burnt toast and regret. Monica, he said. She okay? She's recovering, just barely. Good, I mean, not good. Damn. She came by last month, asked to borrow my laptop. She get what she needed? He frowned. She was poking through my old files, thought maybe I had something on Sweetcraft. I told her to leave it alone. Why? He shrugged. Because I knew those guys were trouble from the start. Shady contracts, impossible demands. They wanted to own her name, her recipes, her life, and they nearly did. Did you keep the files? He nodded toward a box in the corner. Printed copies, old habit, but I don't trust the cloud. I checked. Paper folders, labeled neatly. Invoices, internal emails, notes between Sweetcraft staff, Monica's handwritten recipes, all authentic. And damning, you just let her walk off with the data? She was Monica. What was I going to do, tackle her? No. But someone else might. That earned me a look. You think I did it? I think you better stay reachable. He didn't. Argue? By the time I got back to the brownstone, Saul had returned and deposited Monica's tablet into Wolfe's possession like it was a live grenade. Wolfe was already scrolling with one hand, reaching for a glass of beer with the other. Assume this is the file, he said, pointing to a folder labeled Dragon's Breath, read me. He opened it. I leaned in. It wasn't just a list, it was a catalogue of impropriety, falsified safety certifications, bribes to inspectors, diverted payments, off-books payroll, and worst of all, a notation labeled Phase Out Contingency. Talbot. That, I said, sounds personal. Wolfe didn't respond right away. Then he said, someone feared exposure, and they acted to preclude it. He looked up at me. Tomorrow morning we invite our guests. The brownstone will be disturbed, and just like that the gauntlet was on the carpet. It's one thing when Nero Wolfe declares war. It's another when he opens his doors. He hates it. He loathes noise, clatter, interruption, and the peculiar draft that follows people with unresolved grudges into his office. But when Wolfe says the brownstone will be disturbed, you don't call the bomb squad. You call Saul Panzer, Ori Cather, and Fred Durkin, hand them an invite list and start stockpiling beer and aspirin. The next morning was all drizzle and gloom again, like the weather had caught the mood. I was at my desk at 9:30, sorting through paper copies of Monica's files, while Fritz clanked with surgical precision in the kitchen. Wolfe was upstairs with the orchids, giving the Phalaenopsis their daily sermon. When he returned, he informed me with uncharacteristic brevity, "We proceed." By 11 o'clock, the first of the guests arrived. Lana Tripp stepped through the front door with a composure that could have kept ice solid in July. She wore a charcoal suit with just enough edge to suggest she dressed for court more often. Then she admitted. I took her coat, let her glance around with carefully veiled disdain, and escorted her into the office. Next came Kenny Voss, trying for relaxed and missing by a mile. His eyes scanned every room like he was counting exits, He gave me a sheepish nod as I relieved him of a damp windbreaker and pointed him toward the yellow chair. Then came Miranda Glick. She was shorter than I expected, wearing a maroon trench coat and the expression of a woman who believed she'd been unfairly passed over for sainthood. She shook her umbrella with theatrical flair before I snatched it away to keep Fritz from having a conniption. And finally, Russell Tinnan, whose manner was precise and guarded, like a man approaching a bank vault he'd once tried to crack, when Wolfe finally entered the room. It was with the slow, deliberate gravitas of a judge who already knew the verdict. He lowered himself into his chair without a word, adjusted the folds of his canary-yellow robe, and then leveled his gaze like a loaded weapon. "Mr. Goodwin will be recording this meeting," he said. "Anything you say may be used against you, not in court, but in the crucible of reason." That got a raised eyebrow from Lana. Kenny scratched his knee. Miranda sniffed. Wolfe began, "We are here because a woman named Monica Talbot was nearly murdered. The instrument was a brownie, one indistinguishable from her own signature creation. The method was poisoning. The motive we must deduce." He paused, letting the word poison float ominously through the room like steam from a kettle. "I have in my possession," he continued, "a document, compiled, edited, and backed up by Miss Talbot, which details a series of fraudulent, illegal, and in some cases, overtly dangerous actions taken by individuals and companies in connection with a now-defunct brand, Midnight Cravings. This document includes emails, invoices, and internal memos, all of which suggest that Miss Talbot became a liability the moment she chose to expose those practices." Lana's lips parted just enough to speak, but Wolfe raised a finger. "You will have your turn." He turned his gaze on Kenny Voss. "Mr. Voss, you were in possession of this material. You showed it to Miss Talbot. You did not warn her of the danger it posed." Kenny looked like he wanted to vanish into the upholstery. "I didn't know she was going to copy it." She had every reason to. These records implicate Sweetcraft in the bribery of food inspectors, falsification of safety testing, and use of unapproved ingredients, Lana bristled. "That's nonsense, is it?" Wolfe's voice was cool, almost amused. In an email dated March 3rd, a Sweetcraft internal note refers to the lavender extract incident. That incident, as it turns out, caused multiple allergic reactions, none reported, none traced, but Monica kept a sample. She tested it independently. She found undisclosed stabilizers. The email concludes with the phrase, "Repackage quietly, reassign labels. Talbot needn't know." Lana didn't respond. She stared at the carpet with professional detachment. Wolfe's eyes moved next to Miranda Glick. "Miss Glick, you claim to have discovered a hair in your lemon bar. You posted a widely shared condemnation of Monica's kitchen practices. And yet, there is evidence that you received payment from Sweetcraft in the weeks following the post. Care to explain?" Miranda flushed. "They offered me a sponsorship deal. It wasn't payment, it was an opportunity. To defame someone and benefit from the result. That's quite the opportunity." "I didn't poison her," she said, tightly. Wolfe inclined his head. "No. You merely made it easier for others to do so by softening her reputation and isolating her allies." He turned slowly to Russell Tinnan. "You encouraged Monica to sell. You dismissed her ethics. When she refused, you began distancing yourself. Yet you had access to her packaging. You could have mimicked her presentation exactly." "I was trying to protect her," Tinnan said. Wolfe blinked. "From what?" "From herself. From her pride. She wouldn't listen to reason." Wolfe shifted his bulk and took a sip of beer. "Mr. Voss, the poison used was a derivative of oleander, not readily available, but it was traced to a dry goods vendor you once used. Pellegrini Imports. They carry obscure additives for specialty bakers. Miss Talbot's order history did not include this item. Yours did. Twice. For testing. Kenny's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That doesn't mean You had motive, opportunity and access, but motive is insufficient alone. He looked to Lana. Miss Tripp, your communications with legal counsel refer to a termination scenario. Was that a legal euphemism? Lana looked up, cool as a glass of mineral water. I didn't poison Monica. Did you know someone planned to? She hesitated. No. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Then you are incompetent, not malevolent. I suggest you reconsider your career. Miranda muttered something into her scarf. Wolfe's gaze swept the room once more. The attempt on Miss Talbot's life was clumsy. The brownie was altered. Slightly. The cayenne replaced with pimenton de la vera. An amateur change, but it masked the bitterness of the oleander. He looked directly at Kenny Voss. You knew her palate. You had her trust. You wanted her silenced before she could. Expose what the data revealed. Sweetcraft was to be sold. Quietly. The list would have devalued the deal. That hurt your pocketbook more than your conscience. Kenny's breath caught. She stole from me. No, Wolfe said. She tried to stop you. Kenny looked at Lana, then back at Wolfe. You can't prove it. Wolfe looked at me. I stepped forward and placed 2 photographs on the desk. One showed the original brownie Monica had baked for a tasting 3 weeks ago, preserved, thanks to her compulsive documentation. The second, the poisoned brownie. The differences in crumble, gloss and spice powder were subtle. But there, an expert from the culinary lab at NYU confirmed the substitution, I said. And the delivery box had your fingerprints. You mailed it to Monica under a fake return address. Kenny slumped. Wolfe sighed, almost as if disappointed. You sought silence, Mr. Voss. Instead, you earned an audience. I called Kramer. When the room was empty again, Wolfe didn't move. He stared at the beer glass for a full 30 seconds. Some crimes, he said, are not driven by hate but by entitlement. Then he looked at me. Dinner? I nodded. Fritz has veal and a Riesling reduction waiting. He closed his eyes, satisfied. And outside the drizzle gave way to rain. The following morning the brownstone smelled like civility again. Coffee, fresh toast, and Fritz's rosemary scones. No more pimenton-laced pastries, no anonymous boxes, no unconscious chefs. Wolfe had returned to his orchid room at 9 a.m. sharp. The guest chairs were empty, the rug was undisturbed, and Kramer had taken Kenny Voss away in a cruiser that squealed a little too gleefully around the corner. You'd think the case was wrapped, boxed, and shelved, but Nero Wolfe never declares something over just because the cuffs clicked shut. He likes a little polish, a philosophical final chapter, and more often than not, there's one last crumb to sweep up. Archie, he said, summoning me from the kitchen just after 11. Bring the Talbot file. I brought it. And sit, he added, which meant he wasn't done thinking. I settled into the red chair. He opened the folder, examined a spreadsheet Monica had labeled Confections 3rd Quarter Authentic. Then he sighed. Kenny Voss is not clever, he said, but he is vengeful and sloppy. No argument from me. He tapped the page. But I still do not understand how he knew about the uploaded folder. She said she never told anyone she'd made the list. She used Kenny's laptop. Maybe he checked the browser history. Wolfe waved a dismissive hand. Plausible, but Monica was not an idiot. She would have been careful. And there is another detail. What? She never told us the name of the cloud service she used. I frowned. You think someone else found it? Perhaps, but I dislike conjecture. Call Saul. I did. Saul, still posted outside Monica's hospital room like a trench-coated gargoyle, answered on the first ring. She's better, he said. They've moved her out of ICU. Doctor says she'll be coherent by tonight. She mentioned the upload. Folder? No, but she asked if someone had been in her apartment since the incident. That got my attention. Why? She said her tablet had a notification badge when she was packing it. She ignored it, thought it was system junk. But now she's sure it wasn't there the night before. Meaning someone accessed her cloud folder after she uploaded it. Could Voss have done it? Not unless he guessed her password, which she says was 10 digits and not a single one of them related to baking. I relayed this to Wolfe. He was silent for a long moment. Mr. Tinnan, he said at last, was present when she backed up her files. He brought her the folder, with her latest invoices. He could have seen something on her screen. I nodded. And he admitted they were negotiating, which could mean she showed him the goods to pressure him into helping. Exactly. But that doesn't prove he accessed the file after she fell ill. Wolfe frowned. It does not. But if he did, I want to know why he said nothing about it when he came here. Why offer information about Sweetcraft and omit that? I'll pay him a visit. No, have him come here with the file decrypted. He knows too much. I called Tinnan and invited him over for a follow-up. He didn't hesitate. Said he'd be there by 2:30. In the meantime, I rang up Lon Cohen at the Gazette. Do me a favor, I said. Look into Sweetcraft's corporate structure. See if there's any indication they're about to be bought out, merged, or otherwise swallowed. Lon grunted. They've been sniffing around a European chocolate firm. Belgian. Rumors of a deal on the table for months. No confirmation yet. Keep sniffing. I'll send you something sweet if this pans out. Make it something without cayenne. Click, Atty. Precisely 2:30, Tinnan arrived. Same trim suit, same immaculate hair. But his expression was less composed than before. He looked like a man expecting a surprise party, and not the good kind. I brought him in. Wolfe didn't rise, didn't blink. He simply stared. Mr. Tinnan, Wolfe said, you are familiar with the contents of Miss Talbot's uploaded folder. Tinnan hesitated. She told me she'd compiled something, but I never saw it. Odd, Wolfe said, since your email address was flagged in the access log less than an hour after Miss Talbot collapsed. I watched the blood drain from Tinnan's face like the plug had been pulled. She uploaded it from her tablet. Her account notified her that someone viewed the folder, that someone was you. Tinnan swallowed hard. I was trying to help. Wolfe's voice sharpened. Then why hide it? I was scared. It was damning. If Sweetcraft found out she shared that file with me, they'd assume I leaked it. Did you? No. But you considered it. I considered selling it, he said finally, to Sweetcraft, to use it as leverage, not to hurt Monica, but to protect myself. She was nearly killed, and that was never my intent. No, Wolfe said, but your silence enabled the one who did. Tinnan dropped into the chair like a man lowering himself into his own grave. What happens now? You will remain at our disposal, Wolfe said. Your correspondence will be turned over to Inspector Kramer. I expect he will find at least 3 charges of obstruction, perhaps more. I didn't poison her. But you let her believe she could trust you, while you courted those who wanted her quiet. You're not a murderer, Mr. Tinnan. You're merely venal. Tinnan didn't argue. He left 5 minutes later, and I shut the door behind him. Wolfe sighed and reached for his beer. I detest such men, he said. Cowardice draped in competence. Sat across from him. So that's it? Voss poisons her. Tripp plays dumb. Glick cashes a check. Tinnan folds under pressure. Case closed? He raised an eyebrow. Do you doubt it? Nope. Just thinking we ought to send Monica a box of scones. I'll ask Fritz to prepare a batch. Sans cayenne. He closed his eyes, signaling the end of the business. That evening, Saul called from the hospital. Monica was lucid. She asked if Wolfe had solved it. I told him to tell her the truth. Wolfe had dissected the plot with a scalpel and left no bones unturned. She said she knew he would, Saul added. I hung up and went to pour myself a rye. Wolfe was already at the dining table, inspecting the veal roulade with something close to fondness. "I suppose," he said, "this will not be the last time someone weaponizes a dessert." I sat down. "No, but it'll be the last time someone tries it in our kitchen." He nodded once. "Good." Then he took a bite. And the brownstone at last was quiet. By the following morning, the storm clouds had finally wandered off, and the city was bathed in weak, reluctant sunlight, the kind that looks nice from indoors, but does nothing to help your mood if you've been wrapped up in a near murder involving confectionery sabotage. I arrived in the office around 9 with a coffee, a bruised elbow from dodging a bicyclist on 34th, and a mild curiosity about whether Wolfe intended to let the whole thing end with a quiet veal roulade. He didn't. He was in his chair, glowering at the Oxford English Dictionary like it had insulted his pronunciation of gastronomy. When I sat down, he didn't look up. "Archie," he said, "you have filed a summary of events?" "In triplicate. For you, for Kramer, and one in case you want to submit it to Gourmet Quarterly." Unnecessary levity. I live for it. He reached for a folder on the side table and handed it to me. "This came by messenger half an hour ago." I opened it. Inside was a printout, a copy of a press release with a Sweetcraft header and a timestamp, 9:06 a.m. today. Sweetcraft acquires Belgian confectioner Maison du Cacao in 32 Manitou deal. The logo gleamed like a sugar-glazed apple. The acquisition was positioned as a merger of artisanal values and scalable innovation. In other words, the fox now owned the hen house and had trademarked the eggs. I let out a low whistle. "Looks like Lana Tripp's getting a promotion." "No," Wolfe said. "She's resigning." I blinked. "Says who?" He reached into his pocket and drew out a second slip of paper, a handwritten note on heavy stock, delivered with the same press release. I recognized the stationery immediately. "Wolfe, you were right. The board cut her loose after the acquisition. Tripp was a risk to the brand image. They're calling it strategic evolution." "The usual nonsense. L.C. Lon Cohen?" I asked. Wolfe gave a nod. "He sent both, the release and the note." I leaned back. "So Sweetcraft eats its own. Tripp gets booted, the merger goes through, and everyone goes home with their pockets full." "Not everyone, right. Monica's still recovering. Glick still has her blog. Tynan might do 6 months if the DA's in the mood." Wolfe interlaced his fingers. "Which leaves one question unresolved." I groaned. "You can't be serious." "Oh, but I am." "Which question?" He looked me in the eye. "How did Kenny Voss access the specific ingredient, the oleander extract, without triggering suspicion from Pellegrini Imports? Their inventory is tightly monitored, a controlled substance." I shrugged. "I figured he used his culinary license. He was still listed as a certified vendor. That license expired 6 months ago." I blinked. "You're sure?" "Fred confirmed it last night. Voss never renewed. He was buying specialty imports using someone else's account." I frowned. "Who?" "That," Wolfe said, "is what you will find out." I made the rounds again, starting with Pellegrini Imports. The warehouse manager, a squat man with a jaw like a wine crate, met me near the back loading dock. I introduced myself, dropped Wolfe's name, and showed him a copy of the product manifest. We'd lifted from Voss's invoices. "I remember that order," he said, squinting at the sheet. "We don't sell oleander powder to just anybody. It's labeled as toxic, and we require updated certifications. This was ordered under a standing account." "Whose?" He thumbed through his tablet. "A guy named, hold on, Bradley Carr, from Sugarleaf Experimental Kitchen, Midtown." That name lit no bells for me. "Ever meet him?" "Couple times. Tall, grey suit, glasses, always polite, but off." That was enough for me. I left Pellegrini and headed downtown to the address, listed under Sugar Leaf. The kitchen space turned out to be a shared-use facility in an old converted warehouse near 10th Avenue, all stainless steel and entrepreneurial delusion. I signed in at the front and asked to see Bradley Carr. "Brad's not in today," said the receptionist, a bored 20-something who looked like she was plotting to poison a scone herself. "I was here a few days ago, though. Does he work with anyone else?" "Yeah, he was doing side projects with—" "Wait, wasn't it Miranda Glick? She ran a test batch through his account." I froze. "You sure?" The receptionist tapped a laminated sheet on the desk, a schedule of shared reservations. Sure enough, 2 weeks ago, Glick and Carr listed together, back at the brownstone. I delivered the news. Wolfe sat motionless, but his nostrils flared just slightly, the equivalent of a standing ovation. "She gave Voss access," he murmured. "Perhaps not directly, but she arranged the pipeline. She attacked Monica publicly. She offered plausible deniability, and she paved the way." "You think she knew?" He opened his eyes. "I think she chose not to know." That afternoon, I made one final call, not to Kramer, to Monica. She answered on the second ring, sounding stronger than I expected. "Tell me." I did. When I got to the part about Miranda Glick and the kitchen reservation, Monica was silent for a long time. Then, she hated that I didn't offer her an exclusive. She pitched me last spring, wanted her blog logo on my new boxes. I said, "So? She didn't take it well?" She posted 3 negative pieces in a week. I relayed all this to Wolfe over dinner. He was halfway through Fritz's pheasant consommé and not in the mood for interruption, but he listened anyway. "This is distasteful," he muttered. "A digital vendetta leveraged for personal influence. Do we tell Kramer? No, there is no criminal charge that will hold. Glick will deny knowledge of the substance's use, and Carr has no reason to implicate her." "So she walks? She—" "Does," Wolfe said, "but she will limp. That I guarantee." He looked over at me. "We will release a brief summary to the Gazette. It will name her indirectly. Let the public decide." Trial by pie chart? Precisely. The story ran 3 days later. A side column in the weekend edition. No name, just enough detail. Bloggers picked it up. Glick went silent for a week. When she returned, her tone was softer, a little less righteous. That Sunday evening, Monica sent over a box. Not brownies, lemon bars. Fritz inspected them first. Wolfe sniffed them like they were ancient manuscripts. Then he took a single bite. "Acceptable," he said. "Coming from him, that's a standing ovation." I had 2, just to be sure. And for the first time in a week, no one passed out before dessert. The case of the deadly brownie was, by most accounts, finished. The police had their culprit, the press had their angle, and Wolfe had his orchids. But if there's one thing I've learned living at the side of a man who sees betrayal as frequently as Fritz sees butter, it's this: even when you've named your villain, the ripples keep spreading. It was late Monday morning when the doorbell rang again, sharp and abrupt. Fritz was in the kitchen infusing cream with tarragon, and Wolfe was upstairs doing his usual devotional rounds with the orchids. That left me to answer. I opened the door and found myself looking at Lana Tripp. She didn't look like a woman who'd just been shown the corporate exit. Her blonde hair was pinned perfectly, her trench coat spotless, and her shoes the kind of quiet luxury that made you feel underdressed just by breathing near them. But the shine didn't extend to her eyes. Those were bruised by something other than mascara. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "is Wolfe in?" "That depends. Are you here for business, vengeance, or redemption?" "Can I come in?" I considered it. Wolfe would grumble, but considering she'd just been thrown under the merger bus by her own board, I was willing to bet she had more to say now than she ever had when she was wearing the Sweetcraft crest. I stepped aside. "He's upstairs. Give me a minute to retrieve the mountain." She stood silently in the hall as I went to the plant rooms and delivered the news. Wolfe predictably frowned, but he didn't say no. That in Wolfese was the equivalent of rolling out a red carpet. Back in the office, he settled into his chair and regarded Lana with the cold interest of a museum curator evaluating a suspect artifact. "Miss Tripp," he said, "you survived the purge." "Barely. You're here because you believe someone else was behind the poisoning." That knocked the wind out of her opening line. She gave a brief, humorless smile. "Yes." He steepled his fingers. "Proceed." She took the chair Kenny Voss had squirmed in days earlier and crossed her legs like she owned the room. "Sweetcraft wanted the merger for months," she said. "But the Belgians had conditions. No legal liabilities, no negative press. Monica's document would have killed the deal. The board panicked. I was told to keep her quiet. But not that way." "You approached her?" "I tried. I made the offer, the licensing deal. I figured if I could get her on board, the file would stay buried. But she refused." "You threatened legal action." "I suggested that if she didn't cooperate, we'd pursue a claim of intellectual property infringement." "A bluff," Wolfe said. "Of course, we didn't have a leg to stand on, but I needed leverage. And failing that, someone else took initiative." She nodded. "Yes, and now I'm paying for it." "Who?" "I don't know, but I have a guess." Wolfe didn't blink. "Enlighten me." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a thin folder. I took it and passed it across to Wolfe. Inside were copies of emails. Nothing scandalous. At first glance, just internal memos from the Sweetcraft team. But one thread caught Wolfe's attention. The subject line, alternate plans, pre-merger assurance. The sender, Emery Nash, head of operations. A name that hadn't come up yet. "Who is he?" Wolfe asked. "Senior, long time, keeps things quiet, very corporate. He was overseeing the merger logistics, handled the vendor contracts and the product lines Monica had refused to license." "Wolfe, read the memo. The key phrase, if Talbot proves unmanageable, we can pivot." "Pivot to what?" I asked. "To replacement," Lana said. Sweetcraft had already started reformulating Monica's recipes, testing slight ingredient variations to mimic her work. Nash was in charge, and he hated that she wouldn't play ball. Wolfe looked at me. "Find him," he said. That was my cue. I left Lana in the office and hit the street. Nash wasn't hard to track. Sweetcraft's offices still had his name on the internal contact list. A few calls later, and I had his schedule. Meetings, travel, a presentation tomorrow in Jersey about scaling artisan branding in international markets. I didn't know what that meant, and neither did anyone else. But his assistant mentioned casually that he'd be in the city this afternoon, working from a remote facility. That set off bells. Sweetcraft had a test kitchen on the Lower East Side, a heavily shielded facility used for product trials, packaging designs, and what they called brand-forward innovation. In English, the lab where they mixed, baked, and taste-tested lies. I made my way there around 3. It was a sleek brutalist building, concrete walls, mirrored windows, a single security panel by the door. I waited until a distracted delivery guy buzzed in, then slipped through the service entrance. Inside, the place smelled like vanilla extract and refrigeration. I kept walking until I saw a man in a lab coat and sharp-framed glasses adjusting a set of temperature dials on a chrome oven. "Mr. Nash." I said. He turned. The smile he offered was plastic-wrapped. "Do I know you?" "Probably not, but Nero Wolfe does." That smile faltered. I didn't give him time to recover. "I want to know how a controlled substance made its way into a pastry, designed to look like Monica Talbot's signature brownie, and why your name shows up on an internal memo suggesting a pivot if she didn't cooperate." His tone dropped an octave. "If you're accusing me, I'm asking why a bakery supplier delivered a banned ingredient under the alias of a test chef connected to your lab." His jaw twitched. I had no knowledge of that. But you knew the merger needed Talbot. Gone. I knew it needed compliance. I stepped forward. And when she wouldn't give it, you let someone else take care of it? He didn't answer, which frankly was all the answer I needed. Good day, Mr. Nash, I said. Back at the brownstone, I delivered the play-by-play. Wolfe listened, then rang Kramer. No direct proof, he said when he hung up, but enough to open an inquiry. Nash will be cornered in time. He turned to Lana Tripp, still seated quietly. You were complicit, but not lethal. That is your narrow salvation. She nodded. I didn't know it would go that far. Most do not, Wolfe replied, until it is too late. She stood to leave. Wolfe's voice stopped her at the door. One final question, she turned. Would you have eaten one of those brownies yourself? She hesitated. Not without tasting it first. He nodded. That is why you still live. When she left, Wolfe leaned back in his chair, hands folded over his middle. Greed, he said, is the most predictable poison of all. It just happens to be the slowest. And with that he rang for beer, and I, loyal assistant and recently inducted pastry detective, went to see what Fritz had planned for dessert. No chocolate this time, just pear tart with a cardamom glaze. Safety never tasted so good. The next few days in the brownstone passed in what you might call enforced calm. Wolfe returned to his books. Fritz focused on perfecting a duck à l'orange that had him muttering in French under his breath. I filed the final case notes with the obsessive neatness of someone who knows better than to let Wolfe find an error. And Kramer, though not exactly generous with gratitude, called to confirm that Sweetcraft's legal team had suddenly gone radio silent. Emery Nash, the cool-headed operations man with a pivot plan and a dead eye for profit, had taken a sudden sabbatical. Pending internal review, which in business speak meant, we'll pay you to disappear if you keep your mouth shut. Still, Wolfe hadn't issued his final comment, the one that signaled a case was done, filed, boxed, and in his mind, morally digested. That was always the last course of the meal. So I wasn't surprised when, on the 5th day after Monica Talbert's almost funeral, she herself returned. I opened the door and found her standing there in a navy coat, her hair loose and windblown, with a look that said she'd barely slept, but had finally made peace with that fact. No dramatic flair this time, no pastries, just her and a small manila envelope clutched under one arm. Is he in? She asked. He's breathing, sitting, and slightly irritated. So, yes. She followed me in, and when Wolfe saw her, he didn't. Rise he never does, but he did gesture toward the yellow chair in a manner that for him bordered on gracious. Miss Talbot, he said, you have recovered. I'm walking, talking, and on doctor-approved chocolate rations, so yes. Wolfe gave a faint nod. I brought you something, she said, sliding the envelope onto the desk. Wolfe didn't reach for it. I did. Inside was a single printed sheet and a small flash drive. What is it? I asked. My final recipe log, she said, and the ingredient matrix for all of my best sellers in case someone else ever tries to fake them. Again, you intend to publish these? Wolfe asked, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of surprise cross his face. Yes, she said, every one of them, free, online. No trademarks, no corporate interference. If someone wants to try making my cardamom brownies, they can. I'm done letting anyone claim they own a recipe. I whistled low. You're sure? I almost died because someone wanted to sell what I created without me. So now they can't. Anyone can have it. That's how I win. Wolfe nodded slowly. Not revenge, but liberation. Something like that. He regarded her for a moment, then gestured for Fritz. Champagne, he said. Monica blinked. I don't drink. It's not for you, Wolfe said. It's for the principal. Fritz returned with a bottle. Vintage, French, and probably older than my first job, and poured Wolfe half a flute. Wolfe held it up, studying the bubbles. "Miss Talbot, you remind me of a poet I once read during the war. He declared that the only noble victory is to defy the structure that attempts to define you. You have done precisely that," she smiled. "Not bad for a girl who used to get C-minuses in home EC," Wolfe sipped. "Mediocrity in the classroom often precedes excellence in reality." She stood, ready to go. But Wolfe raised a finger. "There is one unresolved item." She tilted her head. "Russell Tinnan." Her smile dimmed. "He contacted me," Wolfe continued, "via letter. He claims he had no knowledge of the poisoning, but he wishes to apologize. To you." "I got a letter too," she said quietly. "Yesterday I didn't open it. Will you?" "I might, but I don't owe him forgiveness." "No," Wolfe agreed, "but you might find power in denying him what he wants." She considered that, then turned to me. "Thanks," she said, "for not treating me like a problem to be solved." I offered her the Goodwin special, a smile and a wink. "Hey, I only solve delicious problems." She left quietly. No drama, no door slamming. Just the soft click of finality. Wolfe watched the door for a moment longer than usual. Then he looked at me. "Prepare a note to Lon Cohen." "About?" "The recipe release. Suggest he frame it as an act of culinary defiance. The public should know what courage tastes like." I jotted it down. Wolfe leaned back and closed his eyes. "There," he said, "it is finished." But he was wrong, because just when you think Nero Wolfe has closed the final chapter, a footnote always slips in. And this time it arrived not by phone or knock, but by mail. The envelope was postmarked 2 days earlier, from a private law office in Connecticut. It was addressed to Wolfe. Handwritten, heavy paper, embossed seal. He opened it while I watched, then slid the contents across the desk. It was a copy of a revised corporate charter, Sweetcraft, now operating under a new holding company. And in the list of new stakeholders buried in the fine print was one familiar name, Miranda Glick, brand consultant. I stared at it. "You've got to be kidding me." "No," Wolfe said. She pivoted. "After all that?" She provided. Plausible deniability. Distanced herself at the right moment. Now she reaps the reward. Monica gives her recipes away for free, and Glick cashes out. Wolfe lifted his glass. There are always parasites, but they cannot infect what is. Freely shared, Monica Talbot has made herself immune. That night, I sat with a pen and a slice of the pear tart Fritz had made as a peace offering after burning the first batch of biscuits. Wolfe had gone upstairs. The orchids were receiving their evening benediction. And for once I felt like the brownstone had been restored to its natural state, calm, orderly, and no longer threatened by baked goods. Until the next knock, of course. But for now, the case of the brownie that killed at midnight was done, and dinner was served. By Tuesday morning, the city had resumed its usual tempo. Sirens in the distance, cabs honking at nothing, and the faint scent of roasted chestnuts and exhaust. Inside the brownstone, it was quieter. Fritz was at the stove. The orchids were thriving. And Wolfe, having declared the case over, had returned to the intricate business of rereading Theophrastus. You'd think that would mean things were officially back to normal. You'd be wrong. At 10:13 a.m., as I was halfway through the crossword and Wolfe was halfway through a glass of sherry, the front doorbell rang with the kind of urgency that usually meant someone had remembered a final clue, a forgotten confession, or dropped another dead body on our doorstep. Fritz answered, then turned toward the office with a face that said he wished he hadn't. "A gentleman," he told me. "He says his name is Armand Rocher." Wolfe looked up. "That name is familiar," he said. It was familiar to me, too, though it took a second to place it. "Roche owns Délice," I said. "That fancy boutique baking chain, truffle tarts, gold leaf macarons, $12 cookies that taste like regret. Wolfe closed his book. Show him in. I led Roche into the office. He was in his 60s, thin and styled, with silver-streaked hair, eyes the color of gunmetal, and the kind of face that said he'd never eaten his own merchandise, but had once been photographed pretending to. "Mr. Wolfe," he said with a slight bow. "Mr. Goodwin, thank you for seeing me without an appointment." "You arrived unannounced," Wolfe said dryly. "That is not the same." Roche smiled faintly and took the offered chair without waiting. "I read about Monica Talbot's incident, and your role in uncovering what truly happened. I was not surprised." "That we solved it?" I asked. "That Sweetcraft was involved," Roche replied. "They have always been crude in their ambition. And now that they've acquired Maison du Cacao, I expect them to gut it and mass-produce mediocrity with imported labels." "Tragic," I said, "but I assume you didn't come here to mourn Belgian truffles." "No," he said, "I came to warn you." That got Wolfe's attention. "Explain," he said. Roche folded his hands. "Monica Talbot's decision to release her recipes publicly has triggered chaos. Within hours of her upload, dozens of independent bakers began replicating her formulas, some with credit, others without. Sweetcraft is losing market ground, and so, apparently, they've decided that if they can't profit from her directly, they'll do it indirectly." "How?" Wolfe asked. "They've filed paperwork to trademark derivative versions of her recipes." Wolfe blinked. "Derivative?" "They've altered them just enough, adjusted the ratios, swapped an ingredient, modified the method. They've hired a legal team to argue these are inspired variations and therefore subject to protection." "That's not illegal," I said, "but it sure smells funny." "It's despicable," Roche replied, "and it gets worse." "Of course it does," I muttered. Roche continued. "I've seen the internal documents. They plan to sue small independent bakers who use Monica's original names. Brownies, lemon bars, the cardamom glaze, all under a new line called Heritage Cravings." Wolfe made a sound like a dying cello string. "They intend," Roche said, "to profit from the goodwill Monica created, punish those who support her, and rebrand her style as their own." Wolfe said nothing. He just tapped his fingers together. "Slowly, precisely. You have documentation?" he asked. Roche reached into his coat and handed me a USB drive. Copies of emails, drafts of their rollout plan, legal memos. It's all there. I slipped it into my laptop, and Wolfe instructed me to read the highlights aloud. It was worse than we thought. The branding strategy was aggressive. Sweetcraft's legal counsel had drafted cease and desist letters already. Their targets were independent cafes, Etsy storefronts, and even a high school bake sale group in Des Moines. They'd trademarked the phrase "Midnight Heritage," designed packaging that echoed Monica's original minimalist style, and drafted press releases, hailing their commitment to preserving legacy flavors. "Preserving," Wolfe said with disgust, "what they tried to obliterate." Roche nodded. "I came to you because I thought you might care." "I do not care," Wolfe said. "I object." That, from Nero Wolfe, meant war. He turned to me. "You will telephone Miss Talbot." I did. She picked up on the third ring, sounding calm but tired. "They're trying to steal it again," I told her. "This time legally." There was a pause. Then, "What can I do?" "Come here," Wolfe said from across the room. "Bring your original documentation. We will arm you." 20 minutes later, she arrived, holding a black accordion folder with the kind of reverence usually reserved for high explosives. She looked at Armand Roche once, gave a brief nod, and handed Wolfe the folder. "These are my development logs," she said. "Proof of origin, drafts, tastings, ratios, time-stamped, dated. I kept everything." "Good," Wolfe said. We'll make them public." She blinked. "How?" "Through Lon Cohen, through a statement from this office, through direct release to competing media outlets with reach. Roach smiled. And I'll help with distribution. I still have friends in Paris. What about legal defense? Monica asked. Wolfe looked at me. Call Lily Rowan, he said. That raised my eyebrows. You want Lily to... She sits on the board of a pro bono legal foundation. Inform her of the situation. Suggest a high-profile intellectual property defense would provide good publicity. Monica stared at him. You really think this will stop them? No, Wolfe said. But it will slow them. It will force exposure. And it will cost them more than it's worth. She exhaled. Okay. I made the calls. Lon was ecstatic. Lily was delighted. Within 48 hours, the digital press was ablaze with the story of Monica Talbot's culinary battle. Her recipe log became a viral download. Dozens of chefs, some famous, some just broke and talented, rallied behind her. Dahu's Bake Back Better was trending. Sweetcraft's PR team started playing defense. And Wolfe didn't move. He just waited. Then, late Friday afternoon, the envelope arrived. No logo, no return address. Just a thick manila packet slid through the mail slot like a spy dropping off state secrets. I opened it. Inside was a single page. Sweetcraft hereby withdraws all legal claims concerning proprietary variations of the Talbot recipes. A postscript, scribbled in blue ink. Public opinion. Remains our most delicate ingredient. I handed it to Wolfe. He read it once, folded it crisply, and set it aside. I take no joy in their retreat, he said. Sure, I said, but you'll sleep just fine tonight. I always do. He reached for his beer. Fritz brought in the evening menu. Wild mushroom risotto and a delicate pear and saffron tart. Wolfe took a bite. Then he glanced at me. Confections, he said, should nourish, not conquer. He wiped his mouth. And when pastry becomes war, only a fool thinks sugar coats the guilt. I nodded, finished my risotto, and poured a second glass of wine. Outside, the city hummed, unaware it had just been saved from another kind of theft. Inside, the brownstone was peaceful again, for now. By Saturday morning, the case that had started with a suspicious brownie and a cryptic warning had passed into legend at least in the insulated world of niche culinary wars, and Wolfe's rarely disturbed brownstone. The press had moved on to a city councilman's tango scandal. The Sweetcraft legal team was nursing its wounds in silence, and Monica Talbot's website traffic had crashed her server twice in 12 hours. The only remaining item on Wolfe's agenda, apparently, was what Fritz would serve for lunch. I came into the office carrying the Morning Gazette already folded to page 3. Wolfe looked up just long enough to register my presence. They're calling it the Battle of the Brownie, I said, and handed him the paper. He skimmed the headline without interest, though I noticed he didn't put it down. I dropped into the red chair. They quote Monica. Lon and even Roche. There's a half-hearted denial from Sweetcraft's new PR manager, who claims they were never planning to enforce recipe-related trademarks aggressively. Wolfe snorted. They were caught in the act. They can afford humility. I'll send that line to their tagline team. Wolfe set the paper aside. Is Miss Talbot satisfied? I spoke with her last night. She said something about baking again. Small-scale, limited-run subscription boxes, direct-to-customer. No middlemen. And no, she's not interested in licensing. He closed his eyes. Then the matter is concluded. You've said that 3 times this week, and yet here we are. I was about to get up when the doorbell rang. I checked my watch. 10:30 on a Saturday. Another leftover? I asked. Or someone new trying to poison us with biscotti. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a stranger. It was Fred Durkin. Fred looked uncomfortable, which for a guy who's trailed cheating spouses and crooked accountants for decades is saying something. He held his hat in both hands like it might explode if he let go. I wouldn't have bothered you on a weekend, he said, but I got something odd this morning. I let him in and led him to the office. Wolfe's eyes flicked open at the sound of Fred's name. Fred, you have something? Fred nodded. A call from a guy named Brian Keller. He works for a vendor near Yonkers, small company that supplies artisan flours to boutique bakers. I've used 'em myself, back when I tried making rye bread that one winter. You mean the month your kitchen almost exploded? He ignored me. Anyway, Keller says someone came by 2 weeks ago asking to purchase legacy ingredients. When he asked what that meant, the guy handed him a printed list. It was Monica's original recipes, ratios and all, slightly modified but unmistakable. Was this before or after she published the real ones? I asked. Fred grimaced. 2 days before she uploaded hers. Wolfe straightened slightly. And who was this individual? He said the guy gave the name Peter Kroll, said he was with a company called Culinaire Syndicate. But Keller got suspicious, said the man didn't act like a distributor, more like someone trying to corner supply. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Archie. The Sweetcraft acquisition structure. Check the shell companies. Did any include the word Culinaire? I had Lon's original files on my laptop. I pulled them up and searched. Bingo, I said. Culinaire Syndicate Holdings, LLC, a Delaware registry. Wolfe closed his eyes. They anticipated Monica's move. They suspected she would release her formulas, so they tried to buy up the original supply streams before she could. Fred cleared his throat. Keller didn't sell, said the guy rubbed. Him the wrong way, Wolfe nodded. He showed good sense. So what do we do? I asked. Nothing, Wolfe said. Fred blinked. Nothing? Their maneuver failed. Monica owns her formulas, and the attempt to bottleneck supply has already been noted by at least 3 industry blogs. Fred scratched his head. So, that's it? That, Wolfe said, is desperation. Let it stand. Fred stayed another 10 minutes for coffee and Fritz's banana bread, which thankfully no one had poisoned, then left satisfied. When he was gone, Wolfe turned to me. There is one thing left. I raised a brow. We're still going? Not. You. Oh, good. He reached into the drawer and produced a small folded card. It was addressed to Hugo Yost. Another name from the Sweetcraft disaster file. No, an old acquaintance, retired. He once ran DeSalle and Barris, a spice importer of exceptional integrity. He now grows his own herbs in Vermont. What does he have to do with anything? He asked years ago whether I knew any rising talents in pastry. I did not. Now I do. I read the card again. You want to refer Monica? Yes. To move to Vermont. To consult. Temporarily. Hugo runs a seasonal kitchen school for young chefs. He invites only a handful. He pays well and protects intellectual property with a vigilance I admire. I smiled. You're sending her to a pastry monastery. She has earned peace, Wolfe said, and the right to bake without betrayal. I called Monica that afternoon. She paused, then said softly, That sounds perfect. The next morning, she sent a single text. Tell Wolfe I accept, and tell him the pear tart was sublime. I showed it to him over breakfast. He said nothing, but he ate the tart more slowly. And finally, after a week of sabotage, syrupy lies, and culinary brinkmanship, the brownstone settled. That evening the orchids were watered, the curtains were drawn, and as I sat in my room with a book and a bourbon, I heard Wolfe's voice drift down the stairs. Fritz, we will have the lemon tort tomorrow. Yes, sir. With the original recipe. Yes, sir. And so, justice, like dessert, was best served from your own kitchen, on your own terms. It was a Tuesday evening when the world, or at least the part of it that includes Manhattan and values both justice and chocolate, finally settled down. The storm of headlines had passed. Monica. Talbot was already in Vermont, happily designing curriculum modules with names like The Ethics of Glazing and Spices as Memory. Sweetcraft had gone quiet, licking its wounds in silence, and Emery Nash, the man behind the curtain, was now a footnote in every trade journalist's newsletter about corporate overreach. The brownstone, though, was back to its usual rhythms. No visitors, no poison, no one rearranging Wolfe's salt shakers or threatening to topple his moral equilibrium. Dinner had been consumed, chicken Kiev with a wild sorrel salad, and Wolfe had returned to the office with a rare air of actual contentment. Not happiness. Wolfe doesn't do happiness, but the satisfaction of order restored, that he respects. I brought in the last of the paperwork and dropped it on his desk. He didn't look up. All documented, I said. Talbot's relocation, the failed trademark surge, Sweetcraft's strategic backpedal, even the new blog Glick launched. Wolfe frowned slightly. What is its name? Confections and Consequences. He snorted. At least she has a sense of irony. Or a ghostwriter with taste. I sat down across from him. The silence stretched for a few seconds. You were right, I said finally. The crime was never really the poisoning. That was just the symptom. Yes, Wolfe said. The disease was entitlement, manifested through profit disguised as vision. And Tripp, Tynan, even Voss, they all thought they had reasons. He looked at me. They did, but not excuses. We sat in quiet for another moment, the kind you can only afford when the last loose end has been tied up. The case hadn't ended with a bang or a gunshot or even a pair of handcuffs. It had ended the Wolfe way, slowly, surgically, with logic as the scalpel and a good beer as the anesthetic. Do you think she'll stay in Vermont? I asked. She will stay until she's ready, he replied. Then she will return, as one must. To what? To the work, the danger, the joy. One cannot abandon what one creates. He sipped from his glass and set it down with finality, even if others try to steal it. I got up, went to the window, and looked down at the street. A cab honked. A couple argued near the corner, and somewhere a pastry chef was probably reinventing the wheel, or at least the tart crust. What about us? I asked. What now? Wolfe didn't move, but his voice when it came was smooth and certain. We wait. For the next box of poisoned pastries? For the next offense, he said. Against reason. I turned back toward him, grinning. That could be anything. Indeed. And that was that. Outside, the city was still roaring, but in the brownstone, where justice is served with precision and dinner is never late, calm had returned. Wolfe reached for his book. I reached for the scotch and dessert. Père Clafoutis this time was on its way.